Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Justin Taylor, one of the primary care physicians here at Summit Pacific Medical Center. And every year, almost every year, I do the Thriving Through the Holidays lecture, which is designed to help people get through the holidays, especially if their holidays are not the way that they would like them to be. And there are many reasons for that. And we'll talk about all of that. And with me today is Beth Heinbaugh. Beth, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Beth is in our MAT clinic. She is one of the leaders of the MAT clinic. She does a wonderful job. And one of the reasons that I asked Beth to join me today was that she has a very diverse background, and she has a lot of experience with drug and alcohol dependence, which unfortunately becomes more common this time of year. So Beth is joining us today, and we're going to have a conversation back and forth about not only the lecture that you're going to see today, but some of the issues that people struggle with. And Beth and I have spoken in the past kind of briefly about some differences in our backgrounds of how we experience the holidays. And we may get a chance to talk a little bit about that. I'm really big on talking about personal experience so that people can associate with that. And let's move the lecture ahead and see what we have. So last year I did this lecture and I included this slide, which shows unconventional times, sort of indicative of what was going on at the time. And yet we're another 12 months into it, and we're seeing the same thing again. Basically, this slide was supposed to represent some of the social distancing that we're doing currently, and that has been asked of us as we move forward. The way that I start the lecture every year, if you haven't seen it before, is I start with this slide. And the reason I start with this slide is because I want to reflect on Christmas the way it used to be many, many, many years ago. Specifically, pre-World War II to about World War II. This lecture is actually from a movie. Some of you will recognize it. It's from the movie White Christmas. And it's one of my favorite scenes of the movie where they're sitting and they're having a, quote, holiday party, something that we don't see much anymore, especially with this type of setup where people are dressed up and they go to this party and they're all sitting around talking. It's not quite like that anymore. But it represents a friendlier time, a time when the holidays were viewed a little differently. And then I'm going to advance the slides to the next one here. Some examples of the way it was with some holiday cards and advertisements from the 50s. Partially the way it was supposed to be viewed back then, with family and the Christmas tree and closeness. And of course, if you don't recognize these guys, these are from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer series. And I included them because they represent a time. I remember seeing these when I was young, but almost like a wholesomeness to it and a friendliness. And every year you'd see the same cartoons over and over, and people were excited. The kids were excited for the series to come. And there were a bunch of different claymations. All right, the way it was. So let me talk a little bit about this. When you think about the holidays, if you close your eyes and you think about it, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I want you to hold that in your thoughts. Back in the early days, innocence really was presented as the essence of Christmas, which is why it mostly targets children. That's why children are mostly the focus of Christmas. So the most important thing that I want you to think about going forward is how would you, if you could design Christmas any way you wanted to do it in your mind, what would it look like? Okay. And there we go. So holidays and family. This is where Beth and I, we had a very interesting conversation about this. This is the slide that talks a little bit about Christmas the way it was versus the way it is now. And we start to investigate on the slide why things have been different. So the art of celebrating a holiday in general is really a learned behavior based on a previously learned approach, right? Parents teach children. Parents teach children how to go forward. We learn that the good habits and the bad habits can be absolutely translated from our parents to us. And then as adults, we have to carry on the tradition. So sometimes with our new family, such as our spouse, our children, sometimes with friends, and sometimes alone. So I want to talk a little bit about where giving came from and how it transitioned from Christmas the way it was to Christmas the way it is now. This is I don't know if this will work. I'm going to try to, I can't, to load this video. I tried to do this last year and people couldn't hear it. But basically what this video is a bunch of different movie stars from the 50s talking about Christmas and wishing everyone a happy Christmas. And in the different videos, you have, this is the woman from Bewitched. You have stars talking about giving, basically, to the March of Dimes or to the Children's Foundation, etc. Giving, the time to give of yourself. Why holidays at all? Well, Americans work very hard. Traditionally, we have been very hard workers. We work all year round, and we take these designated times to reflect on our families and on our successes and failures of the year. In Europe, things are totally different. Holidays that they have in Europe do not exist here. So, for instance, when I go with my wife to see her family, because half of her family lives in Italy still, they take the whole summer off. They have the entire summer off. And so we don't do that here. They have extended time off after childbirth. They have a lot of different times that they are free to celebrate life, basically. We don't do that. So we create holidays to force people to stop and say, hey, wait a minute, this is life. This is what life is about. And so that's why it's so important that no matter how you were brought up or what your experience was like, that you're able to transition that into a productive time when you finally do have time off. Every time a patient says to me when they have time off for a holiday that they're going to work on this or work on that or do this and not relax, I cringe because I realize that they're not getting a break. Commercialization of Christmas did not happen until after World War II. And there are reasons for this. During the war, there was no excess whatsoever. All of the excess materials went to the war effort. So people learned to appreciate things that they could make for one another, that they could bake for one another, and the time that they could spend with one another. Buying things like a television, a new refrigerator when the refrigerator broke, a new washing machine if you had one. This was non-existent during World War II. So for the period of World War II, the entire time, roughly 1939 to 1944, people didn't buy anything. When the war ended and all of these soldiers came home, there were a ton of jobs available. People were starting to work and they started to make money. Now suddenly, Christmas became a time to show your family how much you appreciate them by providing them with extras that they did not have before. Okay, so let's see here. Before the commercialization, if you had a 4th of July party, it was about a picnic. That's what it was about, spending time together, picnicking, or camping or being close with family. The transition, as I said, came after. And it wasn't until the transition occurred that we started to have the stress associated with the holidays. So this is the beginning of the transition, right? Malikaliki Laka. Do you know how to say it, Beth?
Yeah, you're killing it. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that was accurate.
Do you want to try Mali?
No, I think I'll pass.
Malikalika Maka, right? Okay, so we all remember that song. Let's see here. Good money, plan for gift. Right. As I said, it was a good time to spend money, plan for a gift, a way to celebrate hard work. So suddenly now things like automobiles, televisions, things that people wanted, necklaces, jewelry, etc., became an example of all their hard work. And it was presented for birthdays and Christmas and times like this. The only holidays that they would not do this would be holidays where they were representative of a religious event such as Easter, something where there was a loss associated with it, where it was inappropriate to give a gift. So Easter, in some of the Jewish holidays, of Yom Kippur, and other such holidays. All right. So this is where the stress began, right? So as a family, Beth, when you were growing up, we talked a little bit about, briefly about your experience, but was it common for your parents to buy gifts for you guys during the holidays?
Yes, our parents buy us gifts every year.
Okay. And then you have children.
Accurate, I do.
And you buy gifts for your children, right?
Yes.
And this is where the stress starts.
I actually find buying presents probably the second funnest part of Christmas.
And why is that?
Gifting is important to me. I think it's important to pay attention to the things people like or need, or the things that they don't usually get for themselves, and to kind of fill that void when you're able.
Okay, so for you to go out and to buy these things is pleasurable.
I don't go anywhere. Let's not get that confused. Every bit is ordered online.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So you don't go through the whole standing in line experience.
No, definitely.
All right. So on this slide, it shows Uncle Joe needs a new pipe. Mary would like a new doll. Dad needs new slippers. Mom needs a vacuum cleaner. And then I said, well, that's a different problem. We can talk about another time. But basically, it's when I'm talking to patients about the holidays and they talk about stress, they are talking about the money that they're spending quite often. In fact, I just had a conversation the other day with somebody and I said, so how is it going? How are you doing? How are things? And she said, oh, well, the holidays are all taken care of. She said, I've bought all the gifts for everybody and I've gone into debt again. And so there's the unfortunate part is that when people are doing this sort of thing, they're doing it because they want to give a gift the way you've described. But for some people, it causes that dual anxiety because it's put them into an uncomfortable situation. So it's a real tricky type of thing for most. And it was about many years ago, I read an article in the newspaper that said that 80% of Americans go into debt for the holidays. The problem is that people do it for multiple reasons. You do it, for instance, because you know that it's going to make people happy. They're going to get what they need. But some people do it because they feel obligated to do it.
Why do you think they feel so obligated?
Pardon?
Where do you think the obligation comes from?
I think it comes partially from societal expectations, maybe family, right?
Yeah. When's the last time you were scrolling Facebook and you got to watch their VR commercials where grandma and grandpa and both kids are all playing VR happily together? That's not what my Christmases look like.
Right. And that's all part of it. And I think a little later we'll hear some advice. We'll talk a little bit about how to recreate. But you're right. I mean, that's absolutely right. Most of the commercials that I see for electronics and such, they always try to show a multi-generational approach, and it just doesn't make any sense.
It would be a lot funner to watch the commercials where dad's hauling a Christmas tree in 2 nights before Christmas, and it's the last Charlie Brown one out of the lot, and things kind of a mess, and mom hasn't wrapped anything, and things look a little bit more realistic, but that's not what we usually get. Our social media is flooded with pictures of people with their perfect trees and their perfect families, and everyone's in their matching PJs, and oftentimes that's not the reality for most of us.
And I agree. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And so people look at the stuff and it looks foreign to them. And then sometimes not only do they become uncomfortable when they watch it, but there's a certain amount of resentment and anger,
Or
associated.
the desire to go out and put yourself in debt in an attempt to make yours picture perfect too, because you want your kids to have memories that look like that.
Yes, that's absolutely right. That is absolutely correct. Um, so I think that the next set of slides, we're going to start talking, Beth, about how to first of all, how to connect with the emotional experience with it, and then how to kind of reconstruct it. So I remember when I gave this lecture, the first time I gave it, it was actually in a room with humans.
Whoa,
that was
a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a
We
long
don't do
time
that
ago.
anymore.
Right. Excuse me. And we were talking, a bunch of us were talking, and what was wonderful about that is we were going back and forth, and I was getting all these people that were raising their hand talking about what Christmas meant to them, what their experience was like. And it was amazing how different the experience was. Just how their own personal experience looked visually, as they were describing it. They're so different from family to family. Everything starts with our five senses, right? So it's what we see, obviously, what we feel with our hands and our feet and such. So cold, and that goes with snow and stuff like that. What we smell, hear, and taste. And so scent, believe it or not, scent is the most powerful of all of our senses. And scent will take you back to a really wonderful experience, or it could take you back to a really awful experience. So an example of that would be if you had if every year around this time you had a family event and you had a relative that would always show up drunk, right? Drinking way too much, and the smell of the alcohol on the person's breath or just in general would cement that memory in your mind. And so going forward, whenever you would be at a holiday event for the Christmas time or such, if you were around people and you started smelling that, it would potentially bring up these feelings within you that would not be copacetic with the holiday feeling, right? It would conflict. And you were talking a little bit about dopamine and norepinephrine. You were talking about how these pathways are triggered. You've done a lot of work on that, especially when you're talking to people in the Matt Clinic. And why don't you talk a little bit about perhaps, first of all, kind of introduce our audience a little bit to some of these neurotransmitters you were talking about, and then see if you can tie up some of them with some of these five senses that we were discussing.
Well, that was super fun. Thanks for the lead up to that. I didn't bring those notes at all.
Well, no one here is a scientist, so I think it's hopefully.
So essentially what we're looking at here is that dopamine is the reward hormone. It's the hormone your brain pumps out in order to reward you for whatever you just did. Now, normally we might get those rewards from things like exercise or, I don't know, petting a cute dog or, doing something that brings you a little bit of joy, dopamine. However, when we start adding substances regularly to our brain and those substances are attached to the neurotransmitters, start going back and forth repeatedly, they're dopamine dumping in your brain. So instead of having these little bits of dopamine that come out and make us feel good about things, you're used to a substance going in and getting this huge flood of dopamine where you feel possibly even euphoric and great, and your reward centers are really seeking that out. And I think that that's probably why we see such a spike in the holidays. You add stress, and when your coping skill is potentially substance, use. I mean, people are going to relapse or maybe challenge the recovery some, considering using substances, maybe even just to fit in, especially alcohol, because it is such a socially acceptable drug.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that would trigger smell. It would trigger taste right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that would cement it even more, right? It would make it a tradition. Well, it's normal to do this during this time of year, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting is that we are taught so poorly to handle stress. And we see it all the time in movies, television shows, et cetera. We don't think anything of it. It's gotten to be so natural that we don't think anything of those types of things. So for instance, the Griswold Christmas movie, right? What does he do when he's really irritated and he's really upset with the worst part of his life and the worst situation? Nothing's going right. He dips his cup into the eggnog, which is spiked, and he starts drinking, right? And that's the way he deals with the situation. We laugh about that. We see it. He makes it funny. We laugh. But the sad truth is that is exactly how things go, with many people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it can get a lot worse from there. So let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about some of the historical sight issues, like sight things. So when we talk about the five senses, we're going to talk about sight. So the Christmas tree, right? So all the different types of Christmas trees that we see when we walk into a room at people's homes, all the different types. You were talking about the Charlie Brown tree with the one ornament.
I'm a little Christmas tree obsessive at this point in my life. We got so many Charlie Brown trees that all my trees have to be perfect now.
That's great. Well, in the 50s, they used to actually have Reynolds Aluminum came out with the aluminum foil tree, and they actually would shape this thing, and it would look just like a regular tree, a little disturbing actually, but it was made out of aluminum foil. And then they came up with tinsel, which looks nothing like frost, but for some reason we threw it on a tree to make it look like, ice and frost. Careful, the dogs will choke. And, all different types of imagery that we see. Let's see here. And of course, I pulled this picture off the internet. I thought, wow, what a great picture to show what the Hallmark Christmas dinner is supposed to look like, right? With the tree and the lighting is perfect and you have all the nice place settings, right?
My Christmas never looked like that. That must have been nice.
Right? Must have been nice. Mine didn't either. I don't know. If any of you out there, if your Christmas looked like this, please let us know, because I haven't met anyone quite yet.
But that's the societal norm. That's what you see.
Yes. And I think there's an emotional response to that when people can't achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When their kids are fighting because someone got shot in the face with a Nerf gun that they just opened for Christmas, and you've burned the turkey and you don't even have any napkins and you have to use paper towels, like, your Christmas does not look like it does on TV and you're upset. Those things are not fun.
No, they are not. No.
Doesn't matter how hard you're trying. If you don't, you're never going to reach those standards. So we really have to kind of bring that down to a normalized level where we can still really enjoy it without kind of reverting ourselves into this time where it becomes stressful and unenjoyable, despite all the hard work we put in to try to make it memorable for family or children or even just ourselves.
That's right. I agree with you on that. I do. I think it's so important. And as people are putting their holidays together and they're finding those areas in their lives where they begin to feel stressed out, whether it's buying gifts or preparing dinner, finding tricks and ways to diffuse that without necessarily relying on food or alcohol or any of those issues. It becomes hard. The picture in their minds for people in general as to what things should look like. This was, I have a couple slides to talk about that, because the first way you can deconstruct the type of Christmas that you believe should exist versus the reality is by looking at some of these slides. So this was a wonderful picture I got off the internet, and this was of God, it wasn't White Christmas. It was the one before that. It was Holiday Inn. Holiday Inn was supposed to be the prequel to White Christmas. And so here's this picture of this snowy scene, right, with this horse and carriage, and everyone's cozy and everything is nice. But the reality is that this isn't even a real scene. This is all fake. This is all made up. This is a movie set. You can see now Bing Crosby's waiting to go on the scene. There is no actual real snow. The entire thing is fake. So when we see these images, we have to always remember that this is very much contrived. And the purpose of reminding yourself of that is so that your expectations of how things should be do not surpass your ability to actually enjoy yourself for the holidays. I can't tell you how many people I'll go over to their homes for a holiday, and I would say 30% of the time or 50% of the time they're apologizing about something. Well, I'm sorry this way. I'm sorry this. This is wonderful. This is a great example of a holiday. You know, it's wonderful. The second picture is, I love this. So please count the number of F's that you see in the following sentence, and let me know how many you see. So we'll leave this up for about maybe 15 seconds.
Am I supposed to answer you?
No, it's okay. I'll ask you. We'll see if you can get it. You probably will. You're bright. You know, you're sharp with these things. You're waiting for the trick, so you'll probably get it. And you know what? Don't feel badly if you're watching this and you don't, because I didn't get it the first time either. I screwed it up.
I'm going to feel badly because I already am not going to get it.
Well, you might. Okay, so how many F's did you see in this sentence?
Well, there's 3 F's total, but capitalized F, there's only 1.
All right, you ready? 6. There are 6 F's in that sentence. There's an F, there's finished and files and the word of and the next word of, that's 4. And the letter F in scientific, that's 5. And then the F and the of before the word years. You see, we miss those things because we're looking for leading F's. We're looking for F's that start a word. So our minds play tricks on us, and we truly, when we look at the sentence, we're like, yeah, I don't see more F's until they're pointed out. Then you're like, oh, there they are. Okay, now you can't miss them. Right?
All right, so bring it back in. How did these F's have anything to do with Christmas?
All right. It's not Christmas that the F's have anything to do with. It's an example of how we walk into a situation and imagine something, or how we see it versus the reality of how it is. How do you like that?
Oh, we just got a comment from Janie Anderson. She says Hallmark Christmas movies have unrealistic, perfect decorations too.
They do.
I can't agree more.
They absolutely do. So I am so happy when I start hearing about these comments. Please comment, please mention things, because it means you're starting to think about what you've seen, right? And Christmas is one of my favorite times of year. And it's not because anybody made it that way for me. It's because in my experience, just like Beth, just like the things Beth has been talking about, I have had to recreate my own idea of what Christmas should mean. Beth, why don't you, let's stop for a minute. Why don't you talk about, obviously I want you to talk about what you're comfortable with. Talk about your own personal perception of what Christmas was when you were growing up versus how it is now, and how you kind of got to the point where you shifted things in a direction that was comfortable for you.
You might have to lead me into that just a little bit more. When I was a kid, Christmas was pretty exciting. We did not have a lot of money. So Christmas meant we were going to get to potentially get new clothes. We might get a new Barbie, or for my brother's case, Matchbox cars. Um, we didn't always have a Christmas tree. And when we did, it was the leftover one that was still down at Swanson's 2 nights before Christmas, or maybe the night before Christmas. Um, it was a very different time. I did not grow up with a large family. We were a very small family of four, and we had no extended family near us, so we often did not have Christmas dinner. Um, and so even now as an adult, I'm often baffled when I hear about the things people have for Christmas dinner. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way. It never even occurred to me that you might have ham instead of turkey. Like on TV, they always have turkeys. On TV, they always have hams. I'm just assuming there's just a world of people out there that are having ham and turkey and nothing else for Christmas dinner, because I just imagine that's what it looks like. Now I try to, so I don't have a ton of really cemented memories, or no, that's not true. I have lots of memories. I don't have any cemented traditions. I know that I grew up getting an ornament for my grandparents every year, and so I buy my children an ornament every year. But we've created a lot of new traditions with my kids. I wrap presents for them, but don't put names on them. So I have 3 different types of wrapping paper under my tree, and only I know whose wrapping paper belongs to who. So nothing has names on it. So they're under there shaking. They've been shaking presents for a week now, trying to figure out if the long skinny one is theirs or their brother's. And they really enjoy it, and they get that in their stocking Christmas morning and find out which wrapping paper belongs to them, so they know which presents to open. And we have, they get presents, a present Christmas Eve before we watch Elf and have cocoa and go to bed. So these are just things that I've started because it felt like I needed traditions. Felt like everybody else had a thing they did. Everybody goes to their grandmother's house, or everybody goes to their mom's house, and all their cousins are there. And I didn't grow up with that. So I felt like I needed something to do with my very small family and really kind of cement that we were a cohesive unit and bring some joy into a holiday that probably seems a little quiet when you compare it to big, boisterous families.
That's great. I didn't need to lead you in at all. You did a great job. That's exactly what I wanted you to talk about. That's
great. I made half that up.
Well, I'm glad. At least it sounded good. All right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go? Did you freeze up? Don't leave me here alone. Whew.
I'm right here. So basically, when the lecture was first created, the idea was to survive and thrive in the holidays. And so what did it mean, basically, to survive versus to thrive? To survive would be, just showing up, basically. You show up at the events, you're there, you show your face because you feel like you need to, versus being present in a holiday. Wow, look at that. Look at that turkey. Boy, that looks great. Or look at that tree. Or look at that one ornament that looks just so right. Being present. Noticing all aspects of the holidays and enjoying every step along the way if you can. And knowing that it's not going to go the way you want it to go. And that's okay. That's all right. Some people are okay with that. Like Beth, I would imagine if I came to your house and there wasn't a chair for me to sit in, you'd say, well, so what? Just do something, right?
Joseph, if you came to my house, we're having a very bad day. Please don't ever do that.
Folks, this is what I'm dealing with on a daily basis, I might add. Also, I think that some people would be embarrassed. Some people just wouldn't care. I think if you're more like Beth and you just don't care, you probably would be better off. But anyways, let's continue. Let's go to the next slide. So what does it mean to be present? Beth, what does it mean to be present?
What does it mean to be present? Seeing your thoughts, but not attaching emotions to them. Thoughts aren't facts.
Very good. Very good. Your presence in this moment is not affected by the trouble that you're experiencing from the moment that just passed or the moment that is yet to come. And that includes worrying. Oh, oh my gosh, worrying about things that might happen. I haven't yet mastered that. I'm working on that, but
You know, my favorite example of this is I get a Christmas tree every year right after Thanksgiving, sometimes before because I'm crazy. And and I will put the Christmas tree up, and my younger children are always very excited to help me decorate the Christmas tree. And I am much less excited about this because I need my Christmas tree to be perfect. Uh, and I find it very stressful. As a child, my Christmas tree didn't seem perfect to me, and so they start putting all of the ornaments on a 4-inch space of Christmas tree, while I bite my fingernails and pace back and forth and wait for them to finally give up or go to sleep so that I can rearrange the entire tree until it's reached its perfect amount. Um, it is impossible to stay present in the moment, though I do my very best. But oftentimes, I'll see that in a lot of different places. Have you ever tried to watch a mom make Christmas cookies with little kids? Like with frosting, like they're supposed to look like snowmen, or it's very hard to stay present during those times. And generally, people then kind of will lean towards something else. Yes, Janie Anderson just posted here. Being present means putting your cell phone down,
oh
which
boy,
is something we all forget to do.
you're right.
I usually have mine in my hand because, I'm attached to it, but also that's how I take pictures now. We don't have cameras anymore. And so then we tend to want to take pictures and we're really still staring through a screen.
You are correct. You're absolutely right. Being present means putting down putting down your cell phone. Boy, that is hard. That is really hard, especially because children don't put their cell phones down now.
Accurate. Yes.
Children don't. Of course, every time I come to talk to you about something in the Mac Clinic, you always pick your cell phone up. So I suppose that's a message.
It's so I can quickly dial for help if it gets out of control.
All right, let's go to the next slide here. Paradigms. So what we're talking about when we're talking about redesigning a thought process is a paradigm. And this was a term that came up. I'm trying to remember when this book was, there was a book about paradigms that was published in the 80s. It was the first time that paradigms had been truly looked at as a valid scientific principle. And through the years, it has become more and more apparent that what we're dealing with really are paradigms. So a paradigm was defined as such, and I thought this was a perfect definition. In science and philosophy, a paradigm is a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories, research methods, postulates, and standards for what constitutes legitimate contributions to a field or thought. So let's talk about where that's important. If you believe that Christmas is about being together as a family, and I believe Christmas is about buying things for people, when we come together in a collective, we're going to have a very difficult time agreeing. And when it comes to a holiday, that could interfere with the flow of the holiday experience. The thing about a paradigm is that it is such a strong belief system that drives the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you react, that if it ever is shifted, if you ever have what's called a paradigm shift, where suddenly someone is talking to you about a new concept of how to approach like a holiday, and you start to say, I think I see that now. I think I understand that. You literally go through this shift into a new paradigm, which is so monumentous that you can't go back to the old paradigm. You no longer can validate the old paradigm. And so everything and everybody that's associated with that paradigm, if they don't join you in your new way of thought, the same thing happens. They become estranged from that thought. And so what we're asking, or at least what I'm suggesting, is that if you don't like the way the holidays are going, if you're driven from stress and anxiety into bad habits, like what we were talking about earlier, substance abuse, substance use, more marijuana, more alcohol to try to help with the stress, perhaps you need a paradigm shift. You need to change enough things about that holiday. You need to change enough things that are going on during that time of year so that you truly are at peace and that you're truly happy and not attempting to live in a paradigm that is not good for you.
That
We
sounds
go
all
through
very
paradigm
good.
shift all the time. Things happen to us all the time. One of the most common times that you go through a paradigm shift is when you meet a new partner, someone brand new. You meet them at wherever it is that you're meeting them. For you, Beth, it would be like the library or somewhere very sophisticated, right?
The
Right?
library, so sophisticated at the library. Carry on.
Right? Where you can't really talk because you're not into like the whole communication thing. You like to keep it very short.
Fair.
But you meet somebody and you have an interest in this person and you advance to the next step, which is, going out to eat, going to a movie, sitting and chatting, taking some time to get to know one another. And at that point, you're going to come in contact with someone that's going to have different paradigms than you, whether the paradigms are extreme and you feel that you are not compatible, or whether they're very minor, very small, and you feel like, well, maybe they're compatible. Maybe you could overlook them. That is when the paradigm challenge starts to occur. Okay. So we've all experienced that when we're with people, whether it's friends, whether it's intimate, potential intimate partners. And it's what we do with that paradigm strain that helps us to decide how we're going to move forward. I hear it all the time with patients. They'll say to me, well, such and such does this and that or believes in this and that, but I think in time that person will change the way that they perceive that. What you're saying, what the patient is saying in that situation is, essentially, I'm hoping their paradigm shift, that it will occur for them and that they will see things differently. Paradigm shifts are very difficult, right? And the concept is what you perceive, what you realize is the way you live life. So, Beth, you and I talked about this not too long ago. You and I are very similar in when we're looking at something, we always think about not everything, because I don't want this to come across like we're negative thinkers. We're not, but we prepare ourselves.
I definitely am.
For the worst case scenario, because we can deal with anything else that happens. Hey, we can deal with that. But if we're prepared for the worst case scenario, then we can deal with anything else really easily. And there are a lot of people that do that. There are other people that believe that they'll worry about the worst case scenario if it ever comes up, but that they're always looking for the best case scenario. I'm sorry?
Wonder what that's like.
Right? This is what guides us as we go forward. So what we realize, the way we think is the way we live forward. What you believe will happen, will manifest. Now, you told me a story. What were you telling me?
Oh, heavens.
About like one of the, like the blue house or something?
Are you talking about the tree through the roof?
Yes, tell us, tell them, tell everybody.
We had a large tree right by the window, and the wind was blowing, and I had my baby in the rocking chair, and I kept thinking about the tree going to lose its footing or whatever you call that and land directly on me. So I had to scoot my recliner all the way back in the living room from the far edge because I was sure it couldn't reach me there.
And the way you told the story initially was that the house was situated, there was a lot of wind, a lot of things going on, and and I think what I had said to you was, oh, my first thought would have been, what if the electricity goes out? You said, oh, no, I didn't care about the electricity. I was worried about this random event occurring where this tree that had been there.
What if the tree falls through the ceiling?
Fall through the ceiling. See, for you, that was real. Now, You didn't manifest that, thank God. But it's a series of beliefs and how we go forward with paradigms. And some of you out there may be saying, well, what does this have to do with Christmas? Well, this has everything to do with Christmas, because when you watch A Christmas Carol, or you watch Christmas Chronicles, or you watch the National Lampoon's Christmas Holiday, everything you see is influencing in some way your paradigm on how you view Christmas, right? I don't particularly like watching that movie, the National Lampoon's Christmas, because I think it is too close to what Christmas currently, the reality of what it is now. And so it makes me uncomfortable, because I like to think about happy things. I like to watch movies that suggest possibilities of how things can be changed. Whereas the Griswold Christmas is everything that could go wrong will go wrong, right? When so many of us are already dealing with that. So it's everything about how you view and what you're being programmed to see, and what you grab onto and accept, versus what you say, I don't really like that. All right. So where do we learn our paradigms? Well, unfortunately, we start learning them from our parents, right? And while we're being raised. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. But it almost always is challenged as we become adults, because even though we're influenced by our parents, we're not our parents. Our experiences were not the same as our parents. So my parents grew up in at the end of World War II, and their parents, my grandparents, grew up during the Depression. So my grandmother's parents both died from the Spanish influenza, the 1919 Spanish influenza, which was the last major pandemic. Everything that she did going forward with her children was based on the experience that she had growing up as an orphan, because both of her parents died, which changed the way my mother viewed things. And that conflicted with the way my father viewed things, because he was raised in a very different family with two parents that were immigrants fleeing from the Nazi war, who were fearful of other things. And so our paradigms are driven by our experiences, right? And our personal experiences as we move forward will either reinforce those paradigms or conflict with those paradigms. Thank God for my wife. Don't you say anything. Thank God for my wife, because my wife brings to the table a totally different set of paradigms that are happy and healthy and good. And all of the negative things that I learned growing up are diffused by the positive things that she learned that are opposite to what I learned. Things that I do want to change or did want to change. And through those friends or intimate partners or relatives that we admire, they can help us to realize where our paradigms are at and how we need to shift them into a new paradigm or maintain a healthy paradigm. And sometimes we influence others. So Beth influences a lot of people in the Matt Clinic that come through that are really lost. And she has done a lot of work with self-realization and self-development, that she can actually expunge this wisdom onto some of these people, and has helped a lot of people begin to develop their own new sets of paradigms to help prevent them from drifting back into these bad habits when they experience things that are supposed to be happy, like family events. And so these are examples of how we trial to move forward. Very, very hard. So here are some examples of paradigms. I love this. I'm a loner. I've always been a loner, and I'll always be a loner, right? I don't like people, right? I've heard this from a lot of people. Beth is laughing because she jokingly says this, but I hear this from a lot of people. It's not that you don't like humans. It's that you don't like your interactions with humans, and you don't like how these things turn out, right? So that would require a paradigm shift. We don't celebrate the holidays. It's too expensive. I don't hear this so much anymore, but when I first went into practice years ago, I heard this a lot. And of course, what do you think I said to these people? No, it doesn't have to be that way. And you need to learn to change the way it's perceived in your family, right? And they laugh and they say, good luck, but you can only do what you can do. Bad things always happen on the holidays, so we don't celebrate them. I've heard this a lot. Unfortunately, I've had patients where family members have died on the holidays. This is one of the most difficult things to overcome, especially if a parent dies on the holidays, because it's so hard then to live a holiday experience and not remember the horror of what happened. All right, let me go to the next slide here, because we talk about reframing. So let's start by finding those things that we love most about the holiday and amplify those things in our minds. Oh, I love the smell of the cinnamon or the Christmas tree. I think I said, I don't know, Beth, I thought we had this conversation possibly about the most fragrant Christmas tree that you could find out.
Yes.
Right? Because the smell of the pine needles, which brings joy, or the sound of the fire crackling, and then start immersing yourself in those senses that you remember the most: the sight, the sound, the touch, the taste, the smell. And as soon as you start to drift into a negative thought, you recenter yourself to think about the positive things of the holidays. So last year I told a story. My parents were divorced when I was 3. My mother and my father couldn't have been more opposite to one another. My mother and my stepfather, she remarried, and I had step siblings. We moved. How this happened, I'm not sure, because I have so many families where the parents get divorced and the mother or the father has to stay in Washington, but for some reason, that wasn't the case with us. We moved to New Jersey from Michigan, where I had grown up. And so the holidays were spent between my father and my mother. My mother celebrated Thanksgiving every year, never really celebrated Christmas so much. My father, who was, he dated a lot after he got divorced, never really settled down until recently with a wife, was always going on vacation, and there was no tradition at all with Christmas. My sister would always bring tradition into our lives when I was with her. We would write letters to Santa, and she would set this whole scenario because she loved Christmas so much. So if it wasn't for my sister, I don't think I would have started with a good paradigm. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because as I got older, when I was about 16 years old, 15 years old actually, left home and I went to a boarding school, and I spent a year there because my mother and I were not getting along. And after that year, my father said, you know what? Why don't you come and stay with me? I think I'm far enough along in my personal development that you can come and stay with me. And that's what I did. So from about 16 years old to like the end of my 15th year to about, I would say maybe 21, 22, I stayed with my dad. And one year, I was about 17 years old. I had been dating a girl. Her family, I think they traveled to Chicago to see their family. My friend Dave, who was my closest friend at the time, was spending it with his family. And my father decided that he and his girlfriend were going to fly out of town, go somewhere else for the holiday. So I remember I was actually alone in the house on Christmas Eve. The next day I was going to go and fly out to see my mother, but I was alone in the house. And I remember there was a moment that I was really sad because I felt like, this is such a special time and I'm completely by myself. And I sat there for a little while and then I said, you know what? I'm going to leave the house. I'm just going to go for a drive. And I had an old car that I had, and I got in the car and I drove. And I drove across town to a smaller neighborhood where my brother and sister lived. They were not there. They had already flown out to see my mother, and I was going to meet them the next day. But I remember that their street was it was an old neighborhood. The houses were old. They were very close together, and they were made out of brick. And you looked like, you know what it looked like? It looked like the beginning of the Polar Express. Snow was coming down, and I remember driving down that street, and they had luminaries all along the street, and the snow was coming down, and I looked at the Christmas lights, and I remember thinking to myself, this is what I imagine Christmas to be like. And it didn't require any money. Of course, it required gas for the car for me to get there, but it didn't, and the car, but it didn't require any money. I wasn't spending any time with anybody there while I was driving down that street. And I remember feeling this sense of peace. And I thought, if I could just translate this to people one day so that they could find the same peacefulness in that very moment of just watching, it was so healing. And from that point on, I did not need any company to fully enjoy the holiday season. It was a paradigm shift for me at that moment. And I was forced into it because there was nothing else available. There was nowhere I could go. I had no excuse to go to my girlfriend's house or go to my friend's house or spend time with my dad. I was forced to experience this event on my own. And it really brought a lot of realization to me. And it was one of those moments. So that was how I developed my idea of Christmas. And that is the end of the slide presentation. So I wanted to ask you what your experience was, Beth, and I did. And you gave us your experience. And this was mine. This was how I developed mine.
What do you do now? Like, what is your favorite thing that you do with the other Dr. Taylor and your girls every year as a tradition?
If I could do anything, it would be to go somewhere where there's snow, probably Leavenworth, and just spend it, the four of us together, just sledding and looking at the trees and the lights and having great food and just enjoying each other's company. That's my idea. How about you? Perfect. Like if you could do anything.
If I could do anything, my children wouldn't need presents at Christmas, and I would take them on a trip every year. Every year for Christmas, we would be gone. That's not reality right now. Maybe when they're older, this is something we can do. Currently, I settle for being sure that my kids are all tucked in and then playing Santa Claus. And it's probably my favorite part of Christmas is dragging presents across the house and trying to keep quiet so I don't wake anyone up. Last minute wrapping so I'm not waking anyone up. And then kind of watching our Christmas tree go from just a couple things to something that I know they'll be excited about in the morning, and kind of just sitting with that because it's always done kind of alone with no one else. My kids are all sleeping and quiet. And that's really my favorite time.
That's great. That's a great memory. Has anybody written anything about any comments?
No comments since the last one I read, aside from one that might not be readable. Might have come from someone else.
Okay, then.
I don't.
Okay.
Looks like maybe a toddler was playing with a keyboard.
Okay.
We're very popular in the 2 to 4 year old age range.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And I think that for those of you out there that have no idea what you're going to do for Christmas, you have an estranged family, you have a few people maybe in your family that you hang out with, but it's not anything like what you would imagine. It would encourage you to think about maybe getting into the car and together and driving somewhere different. It doesn't
Funny
have
you
to be
just said that. Janie
expensive.
Anderson just put in a comment. My siblings and I were raised by a single mom on welfare. She would drive us around in the old station wagon to look at Christmas lights.
It's great.
It's all about creating new traditions that make you feel happy. And
That's right.
I know we have to wrap it up here, but a great place to start. Summit has already kind of started doing it with their laser show that they do for Christmas. They did it last year. They're doing it again this year. And that's a great place to start. Start bringing your family, make it something that you're going to do every year. And if you need information about that, it's on our Facebook page, but it's pretty phenomenal and you guys should check that out.
And I think we also did caroling, right?
I'm not aware of caroling, but then again, I also don't sing. We should ask Patrick about that.
Oh my gosh, I think everyone wants to hear you sing. Maybe next time.
No. Kayla Reed says her 4-year-old is loving this too.
That's great. Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining me here. And you are welcome to join me next year as well. I think this is a nice tradition for people. And if you need to see Beth or there are any questions about the MAD Clinic, by all means, send questions. If you know someone who may benefit from the MAD Clinic, send questions ahead of time if you need information. And we are here for you always. Thank you so much.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.